Well, first let's get to living to 90 or 100 with quality.
Well, a lot of people do with quality. I think. Okay, so you say we need to edit our genome. What does that even mean?
I don't say we need to edit our genome, but there's technology now. It's Molecule of the Year in Science magazine called CRISPR. So for the first time ever, we can change one of the 3 billion letters of DNA.
Right.
In China, they changed an embryo a few months ago. They've made malaria-resistant mosquitoes.
This is a great example of a new scientific advancement that the public has little to no awareness or knowledge of yet.
In being able to manipulate the DNA of any organism on the planet, I mean, that really gives scientists extraordinary power.
It does. I mean, it's an important point, actually, because, you know, this is a tool that is so precise that it allows changes to be made to the DNA that are much more accurate than could have been achieved by previous technologies. And so it means that once one understands the sequence of DNA in a cell, it's possible to rewrite that sequence.
It allows everyday scientists to remove or add genes. It's got the medical community buzzing with ethical, social, legal, and health questions because this new method can literally change our collective genetic heritage.
So there are many that hold that the fear of playing God is real when we start manipulating genes.
The question of to what use gene editing technologies should eventually be put with a view to creating humans modified by that technology is a very interesting one.
Should we produce CRISPR babies? This sounds rather alarming. A CRISPR baby would be a child that has had its genes affected by the CRISPR manipulation. At the moment, such manipulations are forbidden. There are a number of reasons why people are worried about this. Firstly, what are the potential effects?
The other application that I think is one that deserves careful thought before forging ahead is the idea of gene drives. The idea of a gene drive is the use of a technology that can introduce a change so rapidly in a cell that it can be used to drive a trait through a population very quickly.
It means then you have a technology to alter the representation of a particular genetic trait in a population and move it to a point where nearly all individuals in that population hold that trait.
Hacking biology, playing with biology, programming it, engineering it, is so unfamiliar to us today that as this stuff gets faster and cheaper, it's going to get weirder. So you have to have an open mind. If you want to run from this room now because of my talk, you're going to have to go a long way away from the world to not be touched by this technology. It's coming that fast and that hard.
If we begin removing disease genes, perhaps we'll want to end up producing highly intelligent, beautifully looking babies. So there's the threat of eugenics, of deliberate manipulation, not to correct something, but to make something apparently better. And many people around the world are very concerned about that.
Alec Ross, who really advised Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State on innovation, just published this book recently, The Industries of the Future. Chapter 2, The Future of the Human Machine. The last trillion-dollar industry was built on a code of ones and zeros. The next will be built on our genetic code. And it's an amazing chapter. But this really is world-changing technology. I really want you to be a part of it.
Right now, the United States government is what I would call almost pro-death. My Transhumanist Bill of Rights has essentially created this framework so that the American government can take up a legal framework and start putting science, resources, and technology towards all of us not dying, all of us living indefinitely. Right now, there's nothing like that in the United States government. The very first thing we're doing with the Transhumanist Bill of Rights is establishing that aging is a disease. Right now, we don't look at aging as a disease, but we should look at aging as a disease because in about 20 years, when we've conquered aging, just like we're going to conquer cancer and Alzheimer's, you're going to look back and say, wow, aging really was a disease.
You really believe in 20 years we could conquer aging?
Well, 20 years is pretty optimistic. Of course, I'm a futurist, so I'm typically saying very optimistic things, but I have no doubt within 35 years we will conquer aging. We've already had success in experiments with mice in reversing aging, in reversing the kind of the tissue damage that comes from aging in certain kinds of organs. It's just a matter of now putting on human trials. So we're a lot closer than people realize when it comes to these things.
Surrogates begins with a laboratory creating a replica of a human controlled by the human mind. The surrogates of the future cannot be distinguished from their human counterparts, but it's obvious that the first surrogates are a combination of man and machine. Kevin Warwick has volunteered to be a human cyborg.
First implant that I had, I've got a, here we go, this is show you what it looked like. So this was the first implant. That's radio frequency identification device, and that was implanted in my left arm, just up here, so pushed in at that point. And what we used this for was simply, as I moved around my building here in Reading, in England, the computer knew where I was at particular points. So it opened doors for me and switched on light.
Fundamental limitation is input-output. So we already have, we're already a cyborg. It's just that, I mean, you have a digital version of yourself or partial version of yourself online in the form of your emails and your social media and all the things that you do. And you have basically superpowers in that with your computer and your phone and the applications that are there. You have more power than the President of the United States had 20 years ago.
And you called it a neural lace?
Neural lace, yeah.
It's totally not Google Glass, right?
No, I'm talking about
So,
something
but
which...
if you wear it? Or you...
No, I mean, it would be... I mean, there are a few ways to approach this, but some sort of interface directly with your cortical neurons particularly.
But doesn't that imply surgical insertion?
Not necessarily. You could go through the veins and arteries because that provides a complete roadway to all of your neurons. Your neurons are very heavy users of energy, so they need high blood flow. So you automatically, with your veins and arteries, have a road network to your neurons.
Still some kind of surgery, right?
Yes, but you could insert something, you know, basically...
And the goal of this is to prevent there being an external AI, particularly one controlled by a small group of people that could be so much more powerful and intelligent than we are that the house
it would be godlike in its capability.
Occurs.
Yeah.
And the way we have babies is changing too. This is IVF. That micropipette holds a single sperm. The technician brings the sperm to the tip, punctures the egg, pulls out a little bit of cytoplasm, mixes it with the sperm, squirts it in, and that's how life starts.
Now, scientists don't much care for the phrase, but what has been called the three-parent baby has the potential to offer a healthy child to couples worried about the woman passing on hereditary diseases. Parliament gave the go-ahead last year for the technique of using parts of eggs from two women, but only if research showed it had no adverse side effects. Now, tests at Newcastle University show it will lead to normal pregnancies.
Government regulators will now meet to decide if the new procedure can be used in clinics. If that goes well, mitochondrial transfer could be in use by the end of this year, with the first baby born as early as next year.
King 5's Alyssa Hahn has more about how kids as young as kindergarten will learn about a sensitive subject.
Schools in Washington state could decide to teach gender identity and expression in the classroom.
Many people are questioning if this update to the Washington's health and education standard is appropriate, while school officials say it's an issue that isn't quite up for discussion. A quarter of the way through Washington's new health and education standards, you'll find new concepts added to sexual health, mostly surrounding gender roles.
They should rethink their job as kind of moralists and stick to just education.
The Family Policy Institution of Washington is mostly concerned that the gender discussion could start as early as kindergarten. Fourth graders would learn to define sexual orientation and identify how friends and family could influence ideas regarding gender.
But now an increasing number of British schools are introducing gender-neutral uniform policies. It's part of a government-funded drive to make schools more sensitive to kids questioning their gender identity.
So they're already dividing their children just by gender as soon as you walk in the school. And it's funny because I did ask her recently how she feels about that. And she was just basically, oh, it's just really weird because they just separate us straight away. Normally when you go in the mornings, the teacher will say, okay, boys do up your ties and girls pull down your skirts. And it's just like, what a way to start the day. Just genderise everyone and make presumptions about everyone.
Now, the current Australian of the Year has a new mission to encourage us to think about the words we use at work, so everyone feels respected, valued and included. Have a look.
The research has told us for years how language cuts people out or cuts them down. All sorts of people cop it. Old labels that don't do justice to who we are today.
Words, making people feel good and bad since offices were invented.
Another phrase General Morrison wants us to stop using in the workplaces, hey guys. So, should the phrase be removed or is it taking equality too far? It's our daily dilemma. Wow.
Ironically, that's the logical conclusion of this kind of ridiculous sort of PC and overdrive groupthink censorship that everyone seems to be engaged in now. Instead of actually finding real problems, areas where people are being genuinely oppressed, they're going around looking for ways you can read offensiveness into things that
into
people
anything,
have been finding completely inoffensive
Well, that's
for
my
years.
real issue with this argument here, is that it's being sold as a gender diversity, gender inequality issue.
CBS shows Person of Interest and Criminal Minds both use facial recognition to identify people and solve crimes. It's very helpful to law enforcement, but it's being used more and more in everyday life.
And Central Florida is home to one of the best software computer vision companies in the country.
Malls are also cashing in on facial recognition. Many mall directories have cameras inside taking your photo to determine the shopper's age, race, and gender. In return, you'll see ads for products catering to your demographic. It's even being used to keep the nightlife atmosphere safe.
It's the first time it's been done in industry, and by the way, the science behind it is very new.
Israeli startup Faceception works on the theory that DNA determines personality, which is reflected in our faces. Faceception is negotiating deals with global security firms and recently signed a contract with a major homeland security agency.
This morning, French officials are calling this a despicable act of terrorism.
We hear much these days about gender identity. The phrase has an almost clinical veneer about it, designed to command assent to a social agenda that allows people to determine for themselves whether they're male or female or even some other option based on personal feelings and inclinations alone. But you might not know that gender, as distinct from biological sex, is a new phenomenon. The idea here is that while sex is biological, gender is socially constructed. Under this theory, one might be biologically male but choose a female gender. Of course, divorcing gender identity from biological reality leads to all sorts of insanity. In a recent example, the International Olympic Committee ruled that biological men can compete as females at the 2016 Olympics under certain conditions. The fact is, these sorts of silly games really can't work in the universe God created and rules. God's word determines who we are, not our own word or our own self-concept.
Solstice begins 6:34 tonight, and this year it coincides with a full moon. I saw the moon this morning and I was wondering if it was full. So they call it a strawberry moon, and it's the first time in 70 years we've had